what's up guys? This is the fourth video in my Linguistics 100 video series, and today we're going to talk about morphology, which is basically the study of words and the components of words. So if you haven't noticed yet, this video series has been gradually working our way up in complexity as far as the linguistic units that we're studying. So we started talking about speech sounds, and then in the last video we talked about the phonemes that those speech sounds are organized into. Today we're going to be talking about morphemes, or word parts that are made up of phonemes, but now we're going to start actually talking about the meaning of words. So this is where things start to get interesting. Not that phonemes and speech sounds aren't interesting, because I find them fascinating. So this is going to be really useful to anyone who is learning a foreign language, because every language treats morphemes differently, and there's a very wide range of languages, ranging from English to some Eskimo languages that we're going to talk about that just get totally crazy. So having a good working knowledge of morphology is going to be really useful to you in your language learning. So let's get started. First, we're going to have to talk about what a morpheme is. A morpheme is the smallest unit in linguistics that can bear meaning. Now, we can talk about smaller units like speech sounds and phonemes, but those don't bear meaning. So let me explain that a little further. We see here we have a sentence, a fully formed sentence that has meaning. The man buttoned his shirt. That is a meaningful utterance, okay? So that sentence is made up of 5 words, okay? Each one of those words has meaning. So let's look at one of those words. Unbuttoned. This is a meaningful word, and this word is made up of 3 morphemes: un, button, and the past tense ed. Okay, so we can break this word down further into meaningful portions. So let's break it down into button. Okay, we'll take that one morpheme. Button is a basic concept. You cannot break down this word any further. Well, you could break it down into but then you've changed the meaning, okay? So we can't take any suffixes or prefixes off the word button. So, for example, if you tried to break it down further, you could break it into 4 phonemes. For example, b, but that's meaningless. It's just a sound in English. That phoneme doesn't hold any meaning. So a morpheme is the most basic unit of linguistics that has meaning attached to it. Okay? And there are different types of morphemes. The most common one that we come into contact with every day and we're all aware of is the root words. Okay? Root words are words like zombie, electrocute, Ewok, apple, dog. Okay, normal everyday words without anything attached to them. Then we have various types of affixes. An affix is basically the prefixes and suffixes that you're familiar with, as well as a few other types that we're going to talk about. So prefixes are like anti. You could make any number of words out of the word anti by just applying this prefix to a root word. Same thing with suffixes. You take a root word like walk, and then you can turn it into walking, walkable. I don't know if that's a word. Usually it has to be a transitive verb. So lovable, curable. And then we have what we call infixes. Now, infixes are exactly the same thing as prefixes and suffixes. Only rather than going at the beginning or the end of a word, they go right in the middle of the word itself. We don't have many examples of this in English, but we do have one example, and this is expletive insertion. So essentially, this is when you put a bad word in the middle of a bigger word. And for the purposes of this video, I'm going to use freaking, or frickin'. But I'm sure you can come up with a lot more creative expletives to insert. So, in words like abso-frickin-lutely, all you're doing is you're taking the word absolutely and you're making it stronger So this behaves just like a prefix or a suffix. The only difference is it's occurring inside the word. You could also use it in words like hippo frickin' potamus, massa frickin' Massachusetts, Phila frickin' Delphia. I could go on and on. Cala frickin' Fornia. I don't want to go to Cala frickin' Fornia. Now, you may be a little leery about me using this as an example because you say, well, Aaron, that's not real English. That's just people being dumb. It is English. This is actually a rule of the English language, and it's grammatical and rule governed. A word like abso-frickin-lutely is a grammatical utterance because native speakers of English will say that. We have ungrammatical versions of this that break the rule when we have terms like if you were to hear someone say ab frickin' salutely, mass frickin' Massachusetts, I don't even know how, like, it's even difficult for me to even break these rules. Philadelphia frickin' yeah, right? These just sound terrible to our ears, whereas Philadelphia sounds just fine, as long as you're not a prescriptivist. And that's because there is a rule to where this infix has to be placed within the word. It must always go before the stressed syllable. So in absolutely, the stressed syllable there is lu, absolutely. So the frickin', the infix, has to go before the lu, and it just won't work anywhere else. Abs frickin' salutely, absolute frickin'ly, just doesn't work. This is a rule-bound phenomenon that occurs in the English language. And it occurs in a lot of other languages as well. For this one, you may say I was kind of stretching by using the expletive insertion, but in a lot of languages, this is just a very normal occurrence. Types of morphemes. So we finished talking about where morphemes can go, whether they're the root word, beginning of the word, end of the word, inside a word. Now we're going to talk about different types of morphemes. And the two main types I want to talk about are inflectional morphemes and derivational morphemes. Inflectional morphemes are a type of morpheme that is used to indicate grammatical function of a word. You add these morphemes onto the end of the word. In English, they're usually suffixes, and they indicate some kind of usually a small grammatical nuance. So for example, take the phrase walk. Then if you want to say he walks, you have to add that little s on the end because it just doesn't sound right to an English speaker if you say he walked to the store. And I should clarify that some dialects of English do allow this. For example, African American vernacular English would allow you to say something like that, and it's totally fine in that dialect. But for most of us, in standard English, he walked to the store is ungrammatical. And so what is that little s on the end doing there? In fact, this is doing basically the exact same thing that the verb conjugations in Spanish do. So in Spanish, you have a word like duermo, I sleep, and then we have a different word, duerme, he sleeps. Now in Spanish, you don't need to include the pronoun before the verb itself to show who's doing it. All you need to do is just change the little verb ending on the end of the verb, and that shows a difference in subject. So we have a much simpler system of that in English, but it does exist. So for example, I sleep changes to sleeps with that s on the end when you're talking about the third person he. Okay? An even simpler example is the difference between dog and dogs. You might not think about it as a suffix, but that s on the end, that's actually a suffix, and that's its own morpheme. It's an inflectional morpheme. Same thing with walks or walked. That ed at the end, you're not really changing the word, right? Saying he walked is not really a whole lot different from saying he walks. It's just adding a little bit of grammatical nuance to let you know that this happened in the past. Now, contrast this with derivational morphemes, which oftentimes will change the entire category of speech that the word belongs to. So we have the word wrap, which is a verb, okay? Then we have the word unwrap, which is still a verb, but you've completely changed the meaning of the verb, right? This is 100% the opposite of wrap. And then you can go on to add another suffix onto this word, unwrappable. And now you've changed the verb to an adjective. And then you could even go further to say unwrappability, like, I don't know. I don't even know how you would use this word. You know how you always see car commercials right around the holiday times where the husband buys a car for his wife and he has a big bow on top of the car and he didn't wrap it because of the car's unwrappability. I don't know, that's kind of a stretch, but you could make that argument. So this is a noun. It's like an abstract noun describing an item that is unable to be wrapped. And the point I'm making here is that derivational morphemes are not just tiny bits of grammatical nuance, like adding an S on the end of a verb, or making a singular verb plural. They make a much bigger difference in the meaning that you're trying to express. So let's take a look at a few different ways that languages treat morphemes, because they all behave differently. In English, we have a phrase, I will love you. 4 words, 4 morphemes. In Spanish, they can express the same sentiment using 3 words. Yo te amaré. And in fact, like I said earlier, you don't even need the pronoun, so it could just be 2 words. Te amaré. Okay? And this 3-word sentence can be divided still into the same 4 morphemes as the English sentence. Yo, te, am, and are. They just include some of those morphemes within the same word. And in Swahili, it gets even more interesting because in order to express the same sentiment that takes us 4 words to say, they have 1 word. So, nitakupenda. I don't know how to say that. I don't speak Swahili. But the important thing is they're still expressing all 4 of those basic meanings that we have in English. Ni, actually, I should have included the glosses on this slide, but I'm assuming ni is I, ta, ku, one of those is future tense, one of those is love, and one of them means you. So they still have the same 4 basic units of meaning that are required to express this sentence. I want to move on to a really extreme case study, which is from Yupik, which is a language spoken by some Eskimo tribes in Alaska and I believe eastern Russia. So in order to say this sentence, he had not yet said again that he was going to hunt reindeer. Well, so this seems like a strange sentence to say in English, but apparently in Yupik, that's just a normal sentence. That's just how they would express this sentiment. Like, he had already said that he was going to hunt reindeer, and he's probably going to say it again, but he just had not said it yet. In order to express this sentiment in Yupik, this is the word that they would use. So what takes us an entire sentence and 14 words, they can say that all in just 1 word. And this 1 word is a single root word, reindeer, followed by 6 suffixes. So, tuntusar atar niksaite gite uk. I don't know how to say that. I probably shouldn't have even tried. I apologize if you're a native Yupik speaker and I just insulted your language by butchering it. But you can see here the root word is reindeer, and then I have listed below each one of the morphemes that is included in this word. And here, where I have the dashes in between the words, those dashes are separating the individual morphemes, and their meanings are listed below. Starting with reindeer, which apparently reindeer is the only standalone root word in this whole sentence. All of the rest of these are just suffixes. So, for example, you have like third person singular. In English, in order for us to express the third person singular, we just have to use another word, he or she. There's no way we can include that word into the word reindeer. Now, in Spanish and some other languages that are a little bit more inflectional, they can include that into the verb. And it just happens that in this Yupik language, they can include a lot of words or a lot of morphemes into a single word. Now, Yupik is an example of what we call a polysynthetic language, which means that it's a language that makes up its words using a whole bunch of morphemes. Now, there's a spectrum of how languages can be, ranging from Yupik on one side that just puts all the morphemes into one word, and on the other side we have isolating languages, which is closer to what English is, where we can't include all these morphemes into single words. Each morpheme has to stand all the way on its own. And a true isolating language will only allow one morpheme per word. So, like I said, it's a spectrum. English falls closer to the side of allowing only one morpheme per word, but of course we know that's not entirely true because we can combine prefixes and suffixes, just not as much as they can in Yupik. And an example of this is Mandarin Chinese, which is even closer to the isolating side of the spectrum than English. Take a phrase like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, we see a little bit of inflection in the English sentence, right? It's not heaven, it's heavens. It's not create, it's created. Well, in Mandarin Chinese, it's even simpler than in English. So, and apparently, like I said, I don't speak Chinese, but apparently what this sentence means, word for word, is start, God achieve, make sky, earth. Apparently they just have two different words for start or something, I don't know. But you can see that they don't have all of the inflectional nuance that even that English has, which English being a relatively inflectionless language. But I just include this to show you that it is a spectrum. And the last thing I want to talk about in this video is allomorphy, which if you watched the last video, this will probably make a lot of sense because it's directly parallel to allophony, which is something that we studied in the phonology video. Basically, a single morpheme can take various forms depending on its phonological environment, just like Tony the werewolf, just like a phoneme. Okay, so what do I mean by this? Let's take the plural forming, the plural phoneme. We all know that in English, in order to make a plural, you put a S at the end. But, like I say, S is a terrible description here because that's not actually what's going on. S is a letter, and that's what you use to spell the word, but that's not what you use to pronounce it. We actually have 3 different ways of pronouncing this plural morpheme, and none of them are pronounced S. So, in words like orc, in order to make that word plural, you put a S sound at the end, orcs. In the word werewolves, you put a Z sound at the end. And in the word witches, you put a uz sound at the end. Now, it's not witch, and it's not witches, it's witches. So you're including a little bit of a vowel in there. Now, taking a look at the chart on the right here, we see that when this morpheme follows a sibilant sound, and we didn't go over this in the phonology, but sibilant is basically a whistling kind of sound that's pronounced with air passing through the teeth, like s, z, sh, zh, ch, or j. When this morpheme follows a sibilant sound, it's going to be pronounced as is, as in witches. When it follows another voiced sound, it's going to be pronounced as z. And when it follows a voiceless sound, it's going to be pronounced as s. So that's why in cats, it ends with a s sound because T is voiceless, so it's natural just to keep using the voiceless s sound. But in dogs, the g sound is voiced, so it's natural just to keep your voicing status going. And you say dogs. It's not an S. I don't know why people always say it's an S. It's not. It's just because we always spell it that way. But that's the basics of allomorphy. I could go into a lot more detail. You're going to want to look up some of the allomorphy in your target language. Do a Google search for it. If you're speaking one of the more studied languages, then you'll be able to find all kinds of information online. There's books written. I have several books on the morphology, syntax, phonology of French and Spanish. Whenever I start learning my next language, I'm sure I'll get some of these books for that language. And it's just really useful. It's just a lot easier to learn a given language when you understand the basic building blocks that it takes to make a language in the first place. So that's all I have for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below or ask me on Twitter. I love hearing from you guys. And so thanks for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.